I'm just going to say a few things to kick this off, and then Rich will as well, and then we'll take any questions you all have for as long as you want to chat. So, number one, I want to thank you for a couple of things. Thank you for being here on a really busy day. Also want to take a minute, and as many media friends we have here in the audience, we want to thank you for your support for the NFL, for our franchise, for helping communicate the story to our fans throughout the year, throughout the years. So I always want to show appreciation for that. It's very sincere. Without the media, it's important for us to get our messages across to the fans, and it's important for the fans to hear from you as you see our results and interpret our results, and so you are our partners. So thank you very much for that. These kind of decisions are never easy, and particularly when you look at the personal side of things, and with the coaches that I've been connected with and Rich over a longer period of time than myself, my 22 years as your owner, it's very painful when you have to make a change like this. There's a professional side of it and there's a personal side of it. So the personal side of it, we look at someone like Coach Smith, similar to Mike Smith, similar to Dan Quinn, similar to, other folks we've had relationships with. This is an extraordinary human being coming from an extraordinary family. A really great person, great leader of men, great family guy, man of faith, a man who's committed to the NFL, a man who's had a rich history in sports, who's had many options in his life but has chosen to pursue being a professional coach. And he's had a great track record for a relatively long period of time, given his age. So we have nothing but appreciation for Arthur and everything he brought to us and his efforts and his commitment by his family as well. However, at some point in time, we have to separate our personal respect, affection for the head coach in this case versus results. And there's no question that over the last 3 years that our results have not been what I've committed to our franchise, which has been having championships and being competitive at the highest possible levels that we could achieve. We haven't done that for 3 years. There's lots of subplots, sub-stories, which we could spend hours talking about, and most everybody in this room has either verbally expressed views on or written about, et cetera. So we could debate some of those things or discuss some of those things, but we are where we are. Search is underway. It'll be co-chaired, co-led by myself and Rich, who's our CEO of the AMBSE, and obviously got a long storied history as a general manager and senior football person, not only for the Atlanta Falcons, but really for the National Football League as well. At the end of the day, I understand the final decision will be mine, but mine will be in collaboration with, with others. As I said initially, we've kind of begun the process, if you will. It doesn't take long to get going, so we're moving. But I also want to be clear on this, is that there is no timetable. The only timetable is to do this correctly, take our time, be thoughtful, do all the interviews, be respectful, make sure we have a full, diverse slate of candidates that we're considering in every way, and give each and every one of them an opportunity to express their vision for our football team, for our franchise, for the roster, and where we are and where we expect to go. We'll take as much time as we need to do that and do it correctly. So that means and I think it's a good thing, as Rich and I have chatted about this more than once, and I serve on the DEI committee for the NFL and have been involved in a number of these changes. The NFL, by design, has kind of slowed the process down. There's multiple teams that are in playoffs now, that there's different rules about when you can talk to each person. rules when they can talk to them on the way to the bathroom, on the way from the bathroom. I mean, it's like a million different rules. You have to pay a tremendous amount of attention to them. I'm making a joke of it, but they're very serious and very well thought out to make sure the coaches are respected, their teams are respected, and their efforts being where they are fully respected as well. And to make sure that all candidates getting a fair opportunity to compete for these unique opportunities. So we will pay all attention to those rules. We did last time, 2001. I think our search process that we went through with Coach Smith was widely saluted and supported at the league level as being kind of a model as to what they would like to see clubs do. I think we did it well. We certainly had hard factual reasons why we selected Coach Smith. So we will take our time and do it as well. So I am reminded of one story. I still remember this with Ambassador Rooney, who's passed away now, Art Rooney's father, Dan Rooney, when we were doing a coach search 17 years ago. And he called me out of the blue and said, I just want you to feel, because we were way down the road and we hadn't selected a coach yet, and either had he. He said, just, take your time, do this correctly. You're going to hear it. You can't hire coordinators. You can't hire position coaches. Hire a head coach immediately, et cetera. He said, and they had taken forever. And the guy they selected was Mike Tomlin. So Mike has obviously been a very successful head coach for them for 17 years, but I still remember that. So I said this to Rich last night, and I would say it to myself. Everybody needs to breathe, including everybody in this room, and our fans need to as well. Understand that we are all entitled to a good cry, whether it be in a literal sense or emotionally. I get that. But nobody up here, nobody connected to our organization has anything else but a full commitment to getting us to the next level, getting us to a championship level, getting us to where we have committed to our fan base that we wanted to be, and that's having an extraordinarily competitive team. So we'll do everything we can to invest in that. As always, we'll put all resources on the table. We have an incredible stadium. We have an incredible fan base that for the last couple of years have been voted #1 in fan experience in the NFL in terms of the environment we've created. We want to make sure that we thank the people in the stadium, but we mostly thank our fans who have brought that energy to the building, despite results that have been something less than they wanted to see and that we wanted to see. But I salute them and attribute a lot of that success to them. So with that, let me flip it over to Rich, and then we'll take as many questions as you all have. We're not in any rush. Be thoughtful about your questions, and outside of my golf game, any question is fair. So I'll refer my golf question to either Rich or Zach, to you, one of the two of you. Mr. McKay?
Yes, sir. So for me, it's a hard day. I'm the son of a coach, so I know the impact of decisions like this and what they mean. They mean to the families, to all the people that are associated with, trying to get us to the championship level. It's a very tough moment. Let me say to Arthur Smith and to what he did for us. When he came in with he and Terry in 21, we were in a situation where the franchise had some veteran players that were on veteran contracts with a very, very challenged salary cap. And I give credit to both, Terry and Arthur in that, they spent 2 years retooling our roster, fixing our salary cap, which really wasn't the function of mismanagement before, but a function of trying to keep a veteran team and taking a chance to win a championship, and then having COVID come in and have the salary cap go down, which really kind of caught us. But that said, I give them a tremendous amount of credit. Arthur is a great human being, a very collaborative head football coach, gave great vision to our scouting department, and I think that allowed the retooling of the roster where I think we're in a good place. We intend to win and compete at the highest levels in 2024. One of the reasons we made this move is that reason. And part of the reason we think we can do that is the work that Arthur and his staff did, as did Terry and his staff. It was not easy. This year, we did not achieve what we wanted to achieve. And there are many factors around it. But for us, we have to look at the fans and say, are we in a place where we think we can compete for a championship? And are we going to be too patient or not? And in this case, we felt like the change was necessary to make sure that we compete in 24 at the highest level. So I, have a really good, I've enjoyed my professional and personal relationship with Arthur. He did, as Arthur Blank just noted, he started at the ground up. I mean, he was a GA or below GA that worked his way all the way up to being a head football coach. And he's a very respectful, very good guy in the building, very good relationship with his players. But we need to always hold ourselves accountable to our fans, and we need to try to put ourselves in a position to compete for championships, and that's why we made this decision at this time.
Let me, there's two other comments I want to add on. One Rich alluded to, and I want to be really clear on this. We've been around situations where the coach has lost, quote, the locker room. You've heard that, seen it, maybe experienced it here, maybe elsewhere, you've read about it. This coach never lost the locker room. And I want to be clear on that, and it's a great credit to him, the other coaches, but it's also a tremendous credit to the players, to the leadership that we have on this roster, in that locker room, that the last play to the last day, they were fighting. So I want to give them credit. And our allegiance, our alliance, Rich alluded to, is to our fan base, but it's also to the players. It's the players. It's not about the financial relationship between us and the players, but we owe it to the players to make certain that, given their commitment to the game, emotionally, physically, energy, passion, everything that they do professionally, that we're giving them the best opportunity to win. And if it's anything less than that in any way, then we have to address that ourselves. So, part of this is to honor our fan base, but part of it is to honor our players and make sure that they know that we will do anything and everything we can to give them the best opportunity to perform at the level that they need to perform to give us a chance to have championships in Atlanta. So salute to the players, and salute to Arthur and his coaching staff for building that relationship with the players. It's very impressive. Not just a handful of players, a number have spoken out on his behalf, which is all accurate and honest and attributable to themselves. They weren't, positioned to speak up. They just spoke from their hearts. So great kudos to that whole group of players and that coaching staff as well. So with that, let's take questions. David Bassity, you all know, will kind of chair the questions, and DL, as usual, first question.
Yes.
As it should be.
Thank you, sir. Arthur and Rich, could you all shed some light and discuss how the meeting went last night, and then if there'll be some parameters on the coaching search with the landscape that's out there now and available candidates?
Well, let me speak to the meeting last night. I think we met for, I don't know, probably a few hours, maybe a little bit longer than that. And we had a very respectful, thoughtful discussion about the last 3 years, about each of the 3 years, about where we were as an organization, as a franchise, where the roster was. We talked about, considerations that were on the table, and just felt at the end of the day, and we spent some quiet time after we finished with Coach Smith deciding that the right decision, all things considered, that we needed to move forward. But it was very, like every meeting we've had with Coach Smith for the last 3 years, has always been thoughtful, smart as heck, caring, kind, cares about the game, cares about winning, cares about the players, cares about our franchise, cares about Atlanta. So that's kind of the tone of the meeting. I'll let Rich talk about the other.
I mean, as typical, Arthur Smith, he's very well organized, very well prepared. It was a great, really good discussion under emotional circumstances after a game and an end of a season. But it was, it was very productive, and it was the right it was the right thing for us to have that exchange, and I was proud of him the way he handled it, and as he does almost all of that.
It's hard not to notice that Terry Fontenot isn't here. A couple different branches on that. First, what's his role right now at the organization? Because it seemed like Arthur Smith and Fontenot had a 50-50 split on decision-making, and why is he not kind of up here, I guess, as part of this process, considering he's still your general manager, if he is still your general manager?
So Terry actually is here. So are a ton of other staff people that'll be heavily involved in the search and heavily involved in the decision as we go forward. Because they're physically not here doesn't mean they're not very well represented here. Terry was aware of the process we were going through. We sought out Terry's opinion of other senior people in our organization as well. So he's done an excellent job as our general manager. Our drafts 2001, 2, and 3, 21, 22, 23 have been good. Some have been a little better than others. Certainly a free agency. The investments we've made this year on the pro side of the ball have been outstanding in my view. Serious investments, serious returns we've gotten from them. But Terry is our general manager and will be heavily involved in the process going forward, as will some other key people that we depend on in terms of their football operations and football knowledge. Rich, you want to?
Yeah, I would say, Michael, I say today that I meet with Terry 25 times. Yes, probably. Yeah, he's doing a lot of work. The search, listen, we've got a lot to organize, and he and his people have to organize it. Arthur's committee that he makes light of, the DE&I committee that added just a few regulations, it's about a 25-page book that you've got to make sure that you comply with in the processes. And, Terry and his group are going to go through all of that, go through all of the candidates, go through all of the research. They'll be sitting right at the table. So there's just a lot of work to be done.
The other thing I would add to that, Michael, is that, one being facetious. I mean, Terry actually is here with us. I mean, he's not physically here with us, but, if you were up at Flowery Branch today, you've got every single coach and staff person is concerned about what does this mean for me? What does it mean for my family? What does it mean for my children? We're already getting requests on, can I talk to this coach, et cetera. So, this is I'm going to say a battle. It's not a battle, but it's a challenge that has to be met on a number of fronts. So he's dealing with one front up there. Rich was up there earlier today. I probably spoke to Terry 4 times myself today. So don't read anything into him not being here as other than he's our partner, he's our general manager. He will definitely be part of this process as we go forward, and we appreciate the work that he and his personnel department have done in the last 3 years. Most people in this room and most people around the NFL would generally say that, we've got a pretty darn good roster in a lot of areas, always room for improvement. But he and Arthur Smith together have put together that roster, so I give them credit for that, and with their whole staffs.
You didn't answer the question about his power now. How are you going to handle that? Is he a 50-50 split to that coach? Or what does that look like?
Yeah, I think the structure, the intended structure would be that, Michael. It wouldn't be different than it is now between the head coach and the GM, depending upon who the head coach is. And, I think one thing we're going to be very committed to is, the head coach could be one that has head coaching experience, could be, there's not going to be a definition of this, head coach. It's going to be left to the best candidate. Terry will play a part in that selection process for sure, a central part, and then we'll determine exactly how you do it between the coach and the general manager. What we did before is kind of the way a lot of teams are doing it, which is 50-50, kind of one's got the draft and one's got free agency, one's got the 53. There's a lot of ways to look at that between the GM and the coach, but Terry will be at that table.
He'll be incredibly involved. The only thing I would say to add on to what Rich said as well is that we made a study in 2002 before Rich was with us, which is hard to believe because it's been 20 years, I think, right, Rich?
20, yeah.
But I was really interested when I became an owner in 2001, and we did this in 2002 with actually a GM that used to work for Rich in Tampa, helped do the study. the history of the NFL, what were the attributes that made teams really successful over a long period of time? So the short and long answer to your question, Michael, is that you need a general manager and a head coach that have the same vision for the football team the same way. How you distribute it, if it comes down to power, you're in a bad place. The word power should never come into play. It shouldn't be measured necessarily. I do sort of believe in the Bill Parcells philosophy is that you're asking the coach to produce the wins and be responsible for the team record, et cetera. At the end of the day, is that, you've got to let them partially or significantly be responsible for helping, prepare the recipe for the recipes that are going to require shopping and what have you for players. And if you ask Terry, back the other day, he just gave me the same analogy. He said, my job is to help fill requirements that the coach and coaching staff believe we need to build a winning roster. So we're looking for collaboration. There has to be collaboration between a general manager and a head coach. Has to be respect, not always agreement. Agreement is not always a good thing. A respectful disagreement is important in any institution, any organization, et cetera. So you want everybody to speak their minds. You want everybody to be listened to. At the end of the day, hopefully you'll have the same vision and same focus. You'll be able to come to decisions that collaterally everybody agrees to. Collaboratively, I should say.
How do you guys feel about knowing you're not going to please everybody all the time? Certain members of the fan base feeling that the structure for the coaching search should be different. Maybe different people, different voices need to be heard more so this time around.
Well, there are different voices that will be heard, right? Obviously, we have a different general manager now that we didn't have last time. We have different personnel people that will be in it. We haven't decided on a search firm, whether we'll use one and who it'll be, but we very well may, and that gives you a different perspective. I think, Nick, it looks totally different today than it looked, 10 years ago in head coaching searches, in that the process is so much slower. There's so much more time for research. There's so much more time for collaboration between a bunch of people to be able to get to an idea and a decision that I think that I hear them. I would say that, in Arthur's time, as an owner, he's hired, I guess, 5 head coaches, 3 of which have winning records, 2 of which don't, 1 of which I can't sleep at night because he got hired. I don't need to tell you who that is. But those 3 coaches with winning records were good football coaches. 2 went to the NFC Championship, one won an NFC Championship and went to the Super Bowl. So, but the process has changed. And to your point, you need more people in it. There needs to be more discussion about it. And I think having Terry and his personnel staff, which now have a pretty good sense of our roster and what the vision was for the roster, will help us as we begin to talk to coaches.
No. The other thing I would say, Nick, I don't think there's anything wrong with the pickers. And I don't say that defensively at all as me being, one of the pickers. But Rich said it. I go back and look at our coaches that we selected, starting with Coach Moore, Bobby Petrino, is probably who Rich referred to.
Maybe.
Coach Quinn, Coach Smith, all incredible human beings, great leaders, but also put up records that were important for us. The winning most coach in the history of the franchise, the coach who took us to the Super Bowl. I mean, I can go on and on. So our coaching selections, I think, have been good. And I wouldn't argue that Coach Smith was a bad selection. Based on the information that we had, based on his record in Tennessee, personally, leadership-wise, leader of men, et cetera, scale of 1 to 10, somewhere between a 20 and a 30, just an outstanding human being. Why his offensive record at Tennessee didn't translate here over a 3-year period, there's lots of stages to that, lots of phases to that, and understand it, but, that's a question. So I think that in every case, I would say this, that we get a greater understanding of what it takes to be a successful head coach in the National Football League. And the challenges over time have changed. Years ago, and Rich could remember this, when I remembered buying the Falcons in 2001, we had one person in the marketing department, one person. There was one person, senior officer, and an EA. That was it. Today, how many do we have today?
Too many?
You know, it's not too many.
Yeah,
How many is it
I'm going
today?
to
Not
say
too
we've
many.
got to have 35,
Yeah,
40?
yeah, but it's, I mean, the business of the NFL and the business of being a head coach has changed. The number of people involved in media today, the channels of media today, the streaming, the distribution, the requirements on the head coach today are dramatically different and much more intense in a broader way than they've ever been before. Go way back when Nick, you had hair and Rich had hair. I mean,
A
you know,
long time
it's
ago,
a long
Nick.
time ago, but I mean, head football coach, the responsibility was this. Today, it's much broader. And so you have to, you know, figure out how do you keep these distractions away from a head coach so they can focus on really what they're paid to do, which is to win games and win championships for the franchise. So I think we continue to go on to more knowledge and become wiser.
Yeah, hey guys, over here.
I'm sorry.
So, in trying to understand or let the fans understand when this decision was made to fire Arthur Smith, you talked about a 2-hour meeting last night where he came in. Sounds like it was a back and forth conversation, almost like maybe he was lobbying to keep his job. Then you talked about separating afterwards from him, and then you decided to make the decision. So does that suggest that you had not decided to fire Arthur Smith right away? Was there a process a few games ago where you started to think about it? And as of last night, does that mean that that was a conversation about how you could possibly keep him, and at the end of it, then you made the decision? How did it play out? I guess I didn't understand totally.
Yeah. I would say, number one, Steak, you probably spend too much time watching serial stuff on TV. But beside that, all that, I mean, I don't think you come to a decision on this, speaking for me. Rich can talk for himself. But it's not, you know, obviously it's not a snap decision. It's one that you continue to ruminate on as the season goes on. You absorb things, you see things, how are we doing, how are we responding, what's our record against winning teams, what's our record against losing teams. Our record against losing teams this year was abysmal, honestly. And Coach would be the first to say that. Lots of reasons, but we lost a bunch of games we probably should not have lost or didn't have to lose, if you will. So, you know, I don't think it was any one thing, and it was not like one point in time where you press a button and decide. At the end of the day, you have to do that, and we did it last night. But, you know, we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to, in a quiet way, several hours after the game, et cetera, to make sure we had a chance to listen to Coach Smith. We had a chance to share with him our observations and our feelings and why we felt the way we did. I think it's just a result of that, you know, of that process. You get to a point where you feel, and I've said this to several of the people, including Rich, I think, you know, last night, is that, you know, I feel pained by the decision personally, but I actually feel at peace, truly at peace about making a decision on behalf of the franchise, on behalf of our fans, on behalf of ultimately our players, not just because of their personal devotion to him, but actually thinking about the future and our responsibility to give them the best environment to create a winning championship team. So it's not one particular moment in time. It's just kind of a growing equation that you go through and you go through and you balance and you rebalance and you balance and you think about. You sleep over, you try to make up the sleep, doesn't work out well, but eventually you come to that decision. And then on your other side of the decision, do you feel at peace about it or don't you? And I feel completely at peace about the decision. Not for myself personally, yes, but beyond that, really for our fan base and for the people that we're connected to.
I want to go back to why Terry's physically not in the room with you here, because, I mean, gentlemen, look, words have to match actions, and optically, you have to understand what it says to everybody in this room and the fan base that Terry isn't here to answer the questions. And given the press release last night where he has just input, if he's not the driving force behind hiring and firing, then it's fair to ask if his role is just somebody of a scout or player person or personnel director. I mean, the idea that he's not here doesn't sell it to many of us in this room in the fan base that Terry has authority to really pick his next head coach, which he didn't get the first time either.
Well, let me just answer the first thing. Rich gave you the real answer, but he actually did have an opportunity the first time. Just to be clear, and you may not know the facts, so let me just, Terry did not know Coach Smith at all. When we actually interviewed Coach Smith first before Terry Fontenot ever met him. We hired Terry, and then Terry helped participate in all the coaching interviews that we did at that time, including Coach Smith. So they had no prior connection, et cetera, and he was involved in that, et cetera. Not solely, obviously, but he was part of the team that helped make that decision. So we have nothing but respect for Terry personally as well as professionally, and the staff that he's put together. So I want to just be clear on that. So, I mean, we can't have everybody here, that we all have roles to do. I mean, if you were at Flowery Branch today, it's a version of a personal, difficult circus up there today. So he's holding that fort down. Rich was up there this morning, and he's dealing with coaches, their concerns, their families, everything going on that's up there, which is very significant. It's not a handful of people. There's a ton of people in that building that we got to be thoughtful about. And I'm blessed having him there dealing with that while we're down here dealing with this. So, Rich, do you want to?
Yeah, the other thing I would say to your question, fine question, but Arthur Smith did not report to Terry, and we didn't set it up that way. We didn't want it that way. We wanted a partnership where there could be a shared vision and get us what we thought we needed on the personnel side, and I think we achieved it. We're definitely in a better place than we were 3 years ago based on their collaboration. Today, as we see it, we see the same setup. We don't see the coach reporting to Terry. But Terry will have that same role as being in charge of personnel. So the idea was, and Michael asked the question, will it be a 50-50? That's our thought going in. Could change, but please don't take it that somehow Terry's role would be diminished. In no way, shape, or form would his role be diminished. His role has still been to run the personnel department, which I think the record speaks for itself. And it's been
These
pretty
gentlemen,
good.
they both, if you look at a traditional table of organization, they both report to Rich McKay. And that, we've been clear about that. So that hasn't changed, and kind of Rich represents Terry up here today. Again, we're trying to divide and conquer, and just be respectful of that we're trying to, it's nothing to do with Terry. I mean, honestly, personally. And I would just share again, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but if you end up with a debate between a coach and a general manager, who's got the 46, who's got the 53, who's got the plus 16, who's got this, who's got that, you really don't have the kind of collaboration. Forget about, in my experience, business-wise or football-wise, but throughout the NFL and the history of the NFL, you really don't want to have that kind of measured, this kind of relationship. You want this kind of relationship between a coach and a general manager. If they don't see the world basically the same way, the world is round, not flat, agree upon the number of oceans, the number of continents, et cetera, they're going to have different opinions about different things, and that's okay. That's healthy in every organization, truly. But honestly, you really want them to be, having that kind of just free-flowing relationship, respectful relationship. And that's what we did have with Coach Smith. And I would say that's what Thomas had with Mike Smith, and Thomas had with Coach Quinn as well. So we'll continue to seek that. It's really not, it's not this or this, it's really more this. How do you work together with the same vision for the franchise?
And one more point I would make too is that when we made the change with Mike Smith, who had been incredibly successful, we chose to keep Thomas Dimitrov and keep him as the general manager. Mm-hmm. And then we hired Dan Quinn. We didn't have Dan report to Thomas. We set them up together. We did that with the idea that we thought that'd give us the best chance to win right away. And 2 years later, we were in the Super Bowl. We felt like that did serve us well because it didn't start with two new people in powerful positions, completely re-examining the roster and doing some things that maybe take us go backwards before we go forward. So that was kind of our thinking then. and it's not too dissimilar to now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, every head coach is going to have a little different perspective on the roster. I mean, we may grade every player or certain players at A's or B's, and they may grade them at a B versus an A. So, I mean, that input's going to be important from whoever the new head coach is. But it's also important in terms of personnel to have that kind of connection so you understand the history and actually share the experience of how this player has played over time, what their transition has been into the league, how coachable are they, have they performed at this level. All of that, Terry and his staff, and it's really his staff as well, are able to help work productively with a new head coach to get the kind of results we're looking for sooner, as Rich said, rather than later, as I think we went through with Thomas and Coach Quinn.
You guys mentioned the first 2 years here, basically complete roster turnover, all the cap issues you had. One can make the argument that 7 wins, he overachieved with that issue at hand. You mentioned he didn't lose the locker room. So was his downfall putting all his eggs in the Desmond Ridder basket? Or at one point, did he ask to get another quarterback? And if so, who prevented that?
So let's go to the quarterback discussion. I would say no. I know of no discussion where there was, a quote, ask for another quarterback. I would assure you that Terry and Arthur talked through a lot with respect to the quarterback position, whether it be draft or whether it be veteran free agent or trade. And I could be wrong, but I know of nothing that, I'm sure they might have talked about it over a beer, but I know nothing that got to a formal discussion point. I think the idea with Desmond was they drafted Desmond 3rd round. They had seen him. They liked what they saw. They saw the progress during all the practices during the 22 season, played 4 games, and they made the decision that that was the best path to try to win this year. It didn't work out for a number of reasons, but let's not just say it was Desmond. But I don't think there was a disagreement over the position. I think that they made most decisions. I mean, listen, they work together like GMs and coaches are supposed to work. We're not there. They're just off working it, and then they come back and report on what they're going to do. But I felt like their relationship, their communication, and their results were pretty good. And to me, this is a unique situation for me because in many of these, you hear this phrase, direction, right? Oh, we got to change direction. That's a classic phrase in a situation like this. I think we like the direction of the team and of the franchise, but I think we need results, and we need results sooner rather than later, and we felt like that was what we needed. That's what we needed to do right now to make that happen.
Zach, let me add on to a little bit what Rich, just to kind of reinforce Rich said. I would take it a step further. There was never capital NEVER is still, I think I could still spell, at least that word I can.
I think you're right.
There was never any discussion about any other quarterback path other than one that Coach Smith and Terry and we supported, but they chose to take. And this is not to defend either Taylor or Dez, but our quarterback play this year was clearly deficient. But quarterback play includes, scheme, play calling, other players. There's a lot of things that go into what makes a quarterback successful or not, and how you transition a quarterback into the NFL with the level of complexity of plays you put in front of them, and whether it matches where they are in their career path. There's a million things that go into it. That's all I'm going to suggest is that, I've learned a lot in 22 years, and that's one of the things. So it's not just the player. It's the coach, the coaching. Many of these young men today, in all positions, come in the NFL today. They are diamonds in the rough, but they need to be polished, and polished by a great coaching staff. So, I mean, Desmond, I'd say Desmond would say the same thing. Taylor would say the same thing. Wasn't the kind of years that they hope to have personally, obviously for the club as well. They'll continue to work on their crafts and continue to get better. And who knows what the future will hold for Desmond. Bright young man, committed, team leader, athletic. Obviously, not the kind of year that he wanted, not the kind of year we wanted. And Taylor Heineke had a different track record elsewhere and played through a number of injuries this year. And so we'll see. But, I mean, I know that I did, and I know that Mr. McKay did as well, that any option that the coach ever wanted relative to whether it be quarterback or any other position was completely supported by all of us 1,000%, 1,000%, without any equivocation.
Gentlemen.
Jared, how are you? Good to see you
Pretty
again.
good. Good to see you too, Arthur.
Thank you.
Wondering how much weight you will put on previous head coaching experience. And, Rich just talked about needing to, to win sooner rather than later. You talked about, Arthur, the demands on the head coach and how it's changed. Given the fact that you've never hired a head coach, a coach with head coaching experience, NFL head coaching experience outside of Petrino, does that change now?
You want to take a crack at it?
Yeah, so I would say, Jared, that for me, I think I've hired 2 coaches in Tampa and then I've been part of the ones here. I think I would say that I am inclined to say that the where you look should be incredibly broad, and it should include head coaching experience. And I think there is something to head coaching experience, but it's got to be the right head coaching experience. And that is not so easy to find, because it's not been easy for me to find over the years. But I think if you find one and you should consider it, absolutely. Why wouldn't you? But I think also you have to, on the coordinator side, you just have to take your time and make sure that you're paying attention to what is their experience, how many years have they been a coordinator. There's a lot of studies that have been done on that, and I think you need to pay attention to that. So I'm not going to sit here and say that you shouldn't have a prior head coach, but I wouldn't also say that you have to be, biased towards it. I think you just got to take I think the one thing that I knew back when I first started in this league was this process used to be a race. That's what it used to be. It was a race. And all you did was get on the phone and race, and you pulled the trigger. You might have interviewed him for an hour, but you were scared. That is no longer the case, and therefore, to me, it makes it way better to do just what you described, which is bring all the candidates in, former head coaches and current coordinators, and let them, have an opportunity to speak and talk to you about your football team.
Jared, I would add on, I know you've been around the league and around the game longer than I've been. I don't know how many years, but very long and long storied career as a reporter and a journalist. Don't want to, salute you for that. I do think today being a head coach in the NFL is more demanding and more complex. Players, I think, are coming into the NFL with a different set of life experiences today, often expectations. And so I think a head coach has to, part of his job is to, sometimes be a psychologist along with everything else, putting a team together with the right kind of chemistry. So I think you either have to you're working with coordinators and bringing them in. There are examples of coordinators like, Sean McVay or play calling, or Kyle Shanahan obviously was part of our franchise and great success here and moved on, obviously even greater success elsewhere. But those are both play callers, but they've surrounded themselves with a structure that allows them to either get enough coaching on the other side of the ball or enough support in their role as a head coach where they can maintain the focus on the football side of the business the way they have to. So I think, if you bring in a coordinator today, I think any coordinator would say is that, I'm great at one side of the ball, the other side of the ball, but, I'm going to need some work to help frame out my job as a head coach and to make sure that my time and attention gets balanced on both sides of the ball, because one side of the ball, the other side of the ball, they're both critical. There's no question the league is leaning more to an offensively minded play these days, the number of points being scored versus in the past, et cetera. But you got to have a great defense to be able to play competitively. We We had a very good defense this year. It wasn't consistently great, and certainly had its moments of stress in the last 4 or 5 games. So, you know, I think that I think as Richard said, you want to cast the widest net you can, and then because of the process we go through today, for all the right reasons, slowing things down. Ambassador Rooney was right many years ago, 17 years ago, when he told me, breathe, take it easy. You'll find the right guy, and obviously he did, and I know we will too, and we have. Just not somebody over that period of time. But, you know, we want to make sure that whoever we bring in, we make sure that he has all of the tools in their toolbox that they need to be fully supported so they can be fully successful. It is a more demanding job, I think, than it was 20 years ago. Rich could speak to that. He would tell you about, I don't know, his dad. I don't know how his father would feel about that today. But I suspect, you know, in many ways, even more demanding than when Coach McKay was at Tampa or, you know, prior years at USC.
Does that mean that your philosophy has changed just in terms of how you weigh head coaching experience?
I say for me personally, I think it's a greater recognition. I think, and maybe this gets back to the question that Nick or one of the gentlemen were asking before earlier, is that, you know, you refine as an owner. I think you refine your definition of what it's going to take to help the head coach become really fully successful. What is everything that we can do to give them the resources, and the resources is the culture, the environment, financial resources, all of those things, and to make sure they have all the piece parts that they need around them so they can produce the levels that represent the very best of them and represent the best for the franchise. And that will vary a little bit from person to person. So if you hire somebody who's got tons of experience as a head coach, they probably need less of that in certain areas because they have that experience. You hire somebody else, you're going to have to figure out, well, how do we make sure that they continue to stay focused on what got them here, which is, you know, great football results, but how do we make sure they don't become diluted in terms of their results on the football field, and make sure they have everything else around them so they can be fully successful. And I do think that most coaches in the NFL would probably say their job compared to 10, 15, 20 years ago is more complicated today than it's been in the past. So we need to recognize that and fill in the blanks for them, help them.
Was it a mistake not to pursue Lamar Jackson?
Was it a mistake to not pursue? You're asking me. I'll give him. Yeah. I don't think so. I mean, I think that, it's easy to say yes, you know, given his year. He's obviously an incredible player. We did not have the cap space. I think the coaching staff felt, coaching personnel, all of us felt collectively, but certainly Coach and Terry, that, you know, we felt we had an answer in Ritter, a younger player without, you know, that kind of contract that would have kept us from actually building the team we wanted to build. Is, you know, what's happened to us too often in the past, Josh, and you've seen this, and many people in this room can remember players that we've drafted well, brought them along, got to year 4, year 5, we had to let them go because we didn't have the cap space. It's not a question of cash, didn't have the cap space, so we had to let players go. That's not a good formula. We want to be able to raise our own children and keep our own children as best we can. So I think, you know, the result of that thinking was that let's stay the course. Let's continue to pursue the vision that we have now, continue to build a roster, build this foundation offensively and defensively, and go from there. It's not a criticism of Lamar. You know, you can debate whether or not he would have really been available or not. You know, who knows whether they would have matched whatever offers are on the table. I don't know that. I'm not sure. But certainly a great player, for sure. Had a great year.
Rich, to use, not to ask you to
You
repeat
wanna
Mr.
add
Blank,
on to
but
that, Rich? I mean,
but in using your words and things that reached or did not reach the level of formal discussion, did that question ever reach the level of formal discussion, or was it?
Well, we're in cap rehab.
box fits properly, square hole and square box and square hole, et cetera, and that takes some time. And so you'd like to get immediate results all the time. Sometimes you can strike and it can happen. Usually it takes some time to go through a healthy transition. And so I agree with Rich. I'm putting a few more words on it, probably a little more excessively so, but you can't be impulsive about these changes. This is Coach Smith was with us almost 7 years. Coach Quinn was with us almost 6 years. I mean, you want to give these coaches time to do their job and working in conjunction with the general manager. Give them time to do it, and it does take time. So sometimes 2 or 3 years is not really sufficient. In this case, we felt, the evidence for us and the direction where the team was going, et cetera, that this was the right time. But I would not look at 3 years as being acceptable, normal, check that box. I don't think, I would say this for every organization in the NFL, that's not a desired outcome, for sure.
Thanks, Bob. Brandon?
Arthur, this is for you and Rich. The things that have gone on for a while, and there's Arthur Blank, the benevolent businessman, man of the community, all the things you've done on the west side and what you did to the Dome with your own funds and what you've done with Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But there's also Arthur Blank, the owner. And there have been 2 winning seasons in the last 11 years, and 3 of your coaches that you've hired have not made it past 3 seasons of coaching. How do you quell the angst of fans that say it's the same old thing with Rich McKay and Arthur Blank coming up at another press conference, and you quell the angst that this could be the time that you could get it right? Or better ask, maybe, how do you self-scout maybe some of the things you've done that you may do differently moving forward with this next coaching hire?
I think that's a very fair question. I think that I, spent a lot of time in reflection, and, you have someone like a Coach Quinn who's performed at extraordinarily high level as defensive coordinator of Seattle and again in Dallas, and kind of why didn't that translate here in Atlanta? Someone like Coach Smith performed at extraordinarily high level as an offensive coordinator in Tennessee. Why didn't it translate here on the offensive side of the ball? So you think about what, as an owner, you can do, but, my job is to, surround myself with the very best people like Rich McKay, Terry Fontenot, great coaches, the whole organization, and it's a whole organization that supports the Atlanta Falcons. I'm not talking about marketing-wise or community-wise, but just even the team. We've got a world-class, first-class organization. And I think they'll bring the very best thinking and the most objective thinking. Everybody's trying to listen and learn and understand and reflect and come up with, a better set of answers where we can. There are things that we can control for and things we can't. But we definitely want to challenge ourselves to make sure we represent the fans in the very best possible way that we can. And it's not a reflection on anybody, I think, in the organization. It's, there are things that you can predict and other things you can't. So it's not a crapshoot, used the word earlier, but there are many variables that come into play in what produces the kind of success. And I do think all of my business experience is long-term. Rich McKay may be one of the most junior executives with us, AMBSE, our broad businesses, if you will, and he's been with us for, 20 years. Our golf business is run by a guy who's been with us for 37 years, best golf specialty retailer in the world today. So, continuity is important for a lot of reasons, which we don't have time for today. It's not the purpose for today, but you want to have long-term continuity where you can because of values, because of seeing a vision the same way, being able to, build an organization that represents what we're looking for. And the truth of the matter is the great coaches who've coached for a long time, whether it be Coach Belichick, 24 years, or Coach Tomlin, 17 years, or I don't know how many years Sean McVay's been in L.A., how many years now?
7, 8?
7, 8 years. Kyle's been, so, it can be done. I mean, it definitely can be done. And I look at the successes that I look at, in my opinion, and I would say fans would say the same thing with Coach Smith and Coach Quinn. They were very successful runs over a very long period of time, winning games at rates that we've never had in the history of the franchise. I mean, we've never had a back-to-back winning season. When I bought the team in 2001, Commissioner Tagliabue told me at that time at the closing that, by the way, this franchise you bought has never had back-to-back winning seasons. I said to Paul, you know, and Paul was the brightest guy in the room. He never would say it, but he was the brightest guy. I said, well, that can't be right. I went back and I checked and I said, you know, I mean, it was probably before the internet was even available. I said, he is right. But, you know, Coach Smith, 5 winning seasons in a row. You know, Coach Quinn, second coach to get us to the Super Bowl. I mean, we've had a lot of success with coaches that have lasted longer than 3 years. So I think that's available out there. It's doable out there. I think that we can have the same kind of success and achieve that at that level and higher as we go forward too. We'll have a ton of good candidates. It's a great city. The building's great, but that's really not what the issue is. I think they'll love the roster. They'll love where we are in terms of transitioning. Rich, I mean, you cannot downplay the importance of what we had to go through in terms of salary cap situation. Every team went through salary cap pressure because of COVID. The revenue went down because of COVID. Our cap went down. But, you know, because of our rolling the dice and being committed to this veteran population we had on our roster, and it wasn't one person, it was a group organization that was making those commitments. At some point, we just had to stop pushing that ball down the field and just say we need to go through a readdress and a reset. And we did it. You know, you can nuance it at any position any way you want to, but essentially we had to do that, as every franchise does in the NFL. And so I think we've made a lot of progress. Today we're in a cap situation where I don't know exactly what the numbers will be, but we'll have a serious amount of cap money left this year. We'll be active again in free agency again this year. So, you know, I think we're in one of the best positions we've been in for a very long period of time as a franchise. You know, we now have to pick a new CEO for our football team, our new head coach, and we'll do that, and we'll do it responsibly.
Arthur, over here.
Oh, Steak, I'm sorry.
On a maybe more of a personal level, having watched you the day you got the job, I guess in New Orleans for that press conference initially 22 years ago, and having sat through 7, 8 of these over the years, is it safe to say that this season is as disappointed close to as you've ever been with a football team, and that helped push this decision, given the excitement of the fan base 14, 15 weeks ago and how quickly it went away, given all the excitement and hype around this season on a personal level, is this as disappointed as you've ever been with watching each week play out game to game?
Well, I mean, I can reflect back, you know, to a specific point in time when I was a little more disappointed than this season, but and I don't want to bring that up again. But and you all can probably guess what that might be. But I would say this: we definitely underachieved this year. I think Coach Smith would say that. I think Rich can say whatever he would say. He's, you know, extraordinarily articulate. But I definitely think that we definitely underachieved this year by a lot. And